Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Sapineri of SciMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.
So I feel like a sin eater with my clients. Do you know what a sin eater is?
We're going to have to look that up.
I know.
I'll tell you, and then you could look it up to just
throwing big words around at us, Jerry.
But I remember as a young man watching a movie, and I tried to look it up on IMDb, and I couldn't find it, but I'm almost sure that Bruce Dern was the Sin Eater. So this took place in the Appalachian Mountains, and basically the Sin Eater was the person who would be ostracized from the community, and this person would live by themselves. And then when someone within the community has passed on, has died, the family lays out food in front of the body or has passed across the food. And then they put out this, of course, good food, not spoiled food, but good food. They put out a feast in front of the body. And then the Sin Eater is called, and the Sin Eater comes and eats all the food. And I'm reading from this because I looked a little bit of this up to do a little bit more research for the show, because I know this is important. And what the Sin Eater says is something to the effect, I give easement now to thee, and for the earthly sins, dear computer user, I pawn my own soul. So this is the way I feel when I deal with some of these computers that, you know, the problems have existed from the time that they purchased, they underpurchased, they're going for price, they're buying some underpowered machine, and it's supposed to be a business computer, and you don't get consulted or you don't have a relationship with them. And then there's all this garbage that happens over the years, all these sins. And then there's this time where maybe the computer's still working, the computer hasn't passed, but you have to come there and you have to eat it. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's like it cuts both ways too, because you're not only eating the sins, but you have to eat a lot of time too.
I see what you did there. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, it's a long walk though, but yeah, it's good.
But anyway, the Sin Eaters, it originated in Wales, and a lot of Welsh people emigrated to the Appalachian Mountains, and they claim that it still existed through the 1950s, although they don't document this, in places like North Carolina, West Virginia. So it's actually fascinating, and you could see where it maybe even had its roots in ancient Egypt or Greece, where they did something similar to this. So I'm the Sin Eater. There's our show title. So I'm dealing with this business client, right? They are holding over from the debacle that happened with Rackspace, where Rackspace had this compromised Exchange server and they pulled the plug on it. And then everybody had to scramble at the end of the year. And we moved all our clients that were on Rackspace over to Microsoft. And typically, when I move them to Microsoft, I have them going to Microsoft Basic, which is that $6 a month plan. I don't know about you guys. Do you normally move them into something else if they're already using 365 for other things? Is it the Basic that you normally sign them up for?
You're talking about the El Cheapo plan, right?
Yes, correct.
So you don't add it on if they already have 365. You don't add it onto their service.
I don't, because again, this is one of those deals where most of the people, they've bought some sort of a family plan. They're trying to do things on the cheap. So how do you add it onto a family plan? You really can't.
It's tricky. I just, not to go off on a tangent about this, but that's the concern, is like that they may be trying to skate by with this cheaper plan. But then in my experience, what happens is down the road, there's going to be 3 calls per year where I can't log into Microsoft, and it's because they have to choose personal or work / school or whatever it is. And they don't understand that this is the scope of app licenses. That's the personal account. And that's assuming it's already under their business email account, which it may not be. If they've just got it associated with a Gmail account for the app licenses, they can probably manage the difference between the two. For those reasons, sometimes it's easier just to add it on. You can step them up to business standard, which is like
business
the email
standard.
Yeah, email hosting plus the app licenses. But otherwise, it's, I guess, business basic for just the hosting.
Yep. Business basic for calendar, contacts, and Exchange email. So you're right. But most of the time, this is where I place them, and they can always upgrade the account. But this is just an easy way for me to get them started because they've got some sort of an email problem, or they've already resigned themselves that, yes, we're going to take your advice. We're going to move over to a Microsoft Exchange server. That's what you're telling us is best practice. And you got to have this whole separate conversation about, here's the thing, you've got family plans for your Microsoft Office suite, and now we need to do this. And then they're like, timeout. You told us this was going to cost us X amount of dollars per mailbox. Now you're telling us something completely different. And sometimes you can shoot yourself in the foot. So we placed them with Microsoft Basic. This is a small company. We were able to move them over and we got everybody ramped up. Their email was flowing back and forth. And then we were waiting on Rackspace to recover all the PST files. And it took them weeks and weeks to do that. And as a matter of fact, they've just been recently sending out emails saying, today's your last day to download the PST files because we're not going to make those available to you, which I think is unconscionable. They should give the people a full year to download their PST file from the point that they recovered it. But that's a whole nother conversation. So everybody moved over. We dealt with the individuals within the company and their PST files. And we, in most cases, converted them to mbox files. And we were able to bring in all the archival email from the failed Rackspace Exchange server. So there was one person in the company who was lingering with his PST files, and I knew we had to address that. And he had a iMac and he had a MacBook Pro. So we scheduled time. He schedules time with me. I take a look at his PST file. His PST file is 99 gigabytes, right? 99 gigabytes. Problematic in and of itself, because that's a lot of email. And he says, I don't delete any email. And this is just, I would love to have this historical email back. So let's do this now. So he had been operational since the failed server, but he just had his more current email. And now he wants to roll everything. And he's using Apple Mail on both computers. So we go to weirdkid.com and we run the program email me. And it converts this large PST file. It took a little while to mbox. And I started with his laptop. And the laptop imported all the archival email. It ended up being, even though it was weird because it was a 99 gig PST file, but I think the whole total aggregate email was less than that. But still, it was a lot of email. So it all showed up chronologically on my Mac. It had the correct origination dates. Everything went perfectly. So the program did what it needed to do. So we move over to his iMac next. And he has an Intel iMac. And he's running a 500 gigabyte drive. And he's almost at capacity with his 500. And this is where I start eating this in. He's got 20 gigs left. And I said, we need to put this project on hold. We can't possibly bring in the mail because you don't have any room. There's no room. So we have to download this file. The file itself is 99 gigs. And then we have to convert it to an mbox format. We can't do that. He says, so what do I do? I said, here's the thing. We were never consulted. We wouldn't have even charged you before you bought this iMac, but we weren't consulted during the purchase. So this is what happens when you go to the store and you're price driven. And that's what our clients do all the time. They just look at the bottom line. How much is this one? And they buy the cheaper one. And you just want to smack yourself in the forehead. So what I did was I had him order on Amazon a Samsung 2 terabyte T7 drive. So what we do, we plug that in. He schedules a session. We dump Ventura on that. We boot from that drive. And then we run Migration Assistant. It imports all his data into Ventura, because I think he was running Monterey, and everything's great, right? So it's humming along, running off of this 2 terabyte Samsung T7 drive now as the primary boot drive. And it took me just a long time to tell him that this is your boot volume. This is the heart of your computer now. This little drive here is what all your data is going to be on. So you have to make sure it stays plugged in and it can't get knocked off the table. All those conversations you need to have. It would be great to have been there physically, because he's out of state, to get some piece of Velcro and like Velcro it to the back of the iMac, where it would stay a little bit safer. Okay, so everything's going well. So we've got enough storage now. We run Emailchemy and we convert them to Mbox. We downloaded a brand new instance of the PST file, which was saved on Dropbox. Everything's great, right? We go to import on Ventura in Apple Mail, and this i7 computer with, I don't know, like 8 gigs of RAM or 16 gigs of RAM. Every time we try to import, Mail just collapses. It's just crashing. So it can't import the data. And mind you, I've been working on this for hours and hours, and I've been trying to be like Joe and trying to keep track of my time and trying to be very fair to the customer, but fair to me at the same time. But it's just taken a long time. I said, I don't know. I don't know what we can do here. He said, well, I got to have I need the archive to match whatever I have on my laptop. I need to have these historical emails on my iMac. And I'm like, okay, I feel your pain. And I'm thinking to myself, this is one of those gotchas. What do you do at this point? So the only thing I could think of that we could do was on his laptop, by the way, was an M1, Apple Silicon. So we were successfully able to import the Mbox files in Ventura in Apple Mail. Before I tell you what I had him do at this point, I tried one more thing. I downloaded, because I've got an M2 here, I've got a laptop, and I figured, let me give this a try. I actually opened up Outlook for Mac on my computer, downloaded the PST file onto my computer, the 99 gig PST file, and I tried to import the PST file into Microsoft Outlook for Mac. Joe, I told you what happened here. Sam, what do you think happened when I imported the PST file?
I assume it bombed out, given your story.
No, it didn't. It actually successfully imported everything, but everything had the date of creation being the date that I imported the file.
Oh man. Yeah, you're reminding me of that saga that I told once on the podcast about the client project where there were like 9 emails that showed the wrong date, and that was enough for the client to abort. Yeah, and then that's when we severed ties there. So anyway, that was rough.
So I didn't even present that solution to him because it wasn't a solution at all. It was ridiculous. You'd open up the email and it would say like 2017, but the header said last night at 5:30. Like ridiculous. Microsoft's own technology doesn't play nice with it.
Yeah, that is weird, huh?
That's really weird. Well, there might be some solution. Somebody may be listening to the show and saying, oh, you got to do this. At this point, it's the fourth quarter, and what are we going to do? So I told him, the best thing for us to do is to go on your laptop. I'm going to do this with you. We're going to divide the years of the imported email on my Mac. We're going to create folders for each year. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to upload each year onto the Microsoft Exchange server, because then it'll sync back to the iMac. That was the only thing I could do. So we start that process, or he starts that process. And along the way, there's MIME errors that are being thrown up. Not constantly, but ones that you need, because it stops and you need to acknowledge the MIME error. It basically says, we can't upload this email. But in the long run, he didn't really care. Every email didn't have to be there, but I think he wanted to feel assured that most of the email was. So he didn't mind slogging through this. I said, look, this is a real edge case. Most common people don't have large email stores like this, or if they did, they had already gone through some email archiving system. And I did explain to him too, that had the Rackspace Exchange server not come crashing down, we could have done this migration seamlessly, federated server to server, using something like Migration Wiz or through the. So he said, okay. I said, this is just going to take a lot of time. You just got to be patient with it and just nurse it up there. So I think he understood the technology. But again, we're deep into hours on this. And like I said, I'm keeping track and multiple days and reconnecting. And he's texting me now back and forth. And it was one of those deals where we could have made appointments and done emails back and forth, but it would have just elongated the process for me. So it was much easier for me to say, hey, I've got some time now. Are you ready? And I've got a meeting, but I could connect with you too. And I'd jump on and I'd reconnect. And of course, all this quick connections to the computers were all facilitated by Adigy. So Adigy was there for me for remoting into these computers every step of the way. So kudos to them. So he contacts me about a week later. It was on a Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. And he said, my email stopped working. Yeah, I can't get any more email. So it took me a little while to figure out. So I logged into his computer and sure enough, he's not sending or receiving email. What do you think's happening?
Is it full?
Yeah.
Called that right away.
So we hit the threshold. So now this is really wacky. I realized the problem. So I start looking at the plans. Microsoft Business Basic for $6 a month gives you 50 gigabytes. Microsoft 365 Business Standard. Guess how much you get? 50 gigabytes. Microsoft Premium for $22 a month. Guess how much you get? 50 gigabytes.
Oh, really?
50 gigabytes. Now, there is some sort of there, and again, folks listening to this, there's some sort of an archiving thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Here, I've gone down this bumpy road with this client who he was lovely. He was really patient, but he's not a technologist. He's not going to say, oh yeah, no problem, I can archive this stuff. He just wants to use his mail, his big pile of mail.
Yeah. So it's like, what do I have to pay Microsoft to make this problem go away? And I think there's a thing that isn't it like called Plan 2 or something, or there's some generic.
Yes, I should have talked to Joe. It took me 3 Microsoft representatives because they call you back when you've got paid plans. They call you back, and they call you back within a short amount of time.
They call you whether you want an email or a phone call. They call you anyway. We've talked about that too. I prefer email. They call me. They're like, I couldn't reach you by phone. I told you not to call me. So why are you complaining?
Well, we may get to this in this show. It may be another show, but you guys are super protective with your calendars and phone calls and texts. So
here we go. So it's our fault. Okay.
Yeah. Bring on the calls. I want people to call me. Talk to me. So it took 3 reps to figure this out. But as you just stated, Joe, what we needed to do, and again, I did not want to pull the plug on his $6 plan. I'm like, screw it. We're going to keep the $6 plan in place. And I asked the guy several times, I said, are you sure I can add this, and I'll tell you what it is in a moment, to my $6 plan and everything's groovy? And he said, yes. So they have something called Exchange Online Plan 1 for $4 a month, which I don't even want to figure out what that does.
I know.
And how that differs from the $6 plan. I just want to find something that the client's going to accept as a pay up that doesn't sound outrageous. And so they have a next tier, which is Exchange Online Plan 2 for $8 a month. And that'll give you 100 gigabytes of mailbox and messages up to 150 megabytes, whatever that means. That's what I needed to do. And it took me at least 3 hours of going back and forth with Microsoft to get somebody on the phone who they were like, hold on, or we're going to call you back. We're going to look into this. And they're conferring with colleagues and nobody knows anything because, shame on Microsoft for having all these different crazy tiered plans. Now, again, I know our listeners, there may be other ways that I could roll this, but for $6 plus $8, I was able to get his mail flowing again. As soon as I added the plan, the floodgates opened and everything started to come in again. And he resumed his uploading, but he was able to send or receive. And there you go. I ate it in more ways than one.
Yeah, I've been there with Microsoft. I feel like every time I go to their website to look up pricing, I get a little confused. And then I have to go down that road again of Googling for third-party references that seem to somehow explain this better sometimes.
Exactly.
That's like the public-facing website. Then I'm in the admin portal and I'm following their instructions. And their instructions are referring to like an old version of the admin portal. And they've renamed something and they've moved it around. And it's baffling to me how often it seems like I have to relearn their admin portal and their their structure of how they sell this stuff. But yeah, I basically come to that same conclusion where, because I have that happen with clients sometimes. They send and receive like multiple PowerPoint files every day that are each like 20 megs or whatever the max is. So it just like balloons in size. And after a couple of years or whatever, then they're bumping into that limit. And we've turned on in the past the thing you mentioned earlier. I think they just call it online archiving. They call it that, but also in-place archive is the terminology. If you go to Outlook on the web, you have to look for in-place archive, which then is a folder among their mailboxes in Outlook Online. And obviously, that's distinct from the archive. Try explaining this to a client; they're lost before you even get started, because in theory, this is a simple solution. Probably not in your case, because the whole point here was to get it on the server, and you probably don't want to then have the server start to offload stuff to like this quote unquote archive. But for my clients, when it starts to fill up, you can basically just turn on this feature. And I think now I'm trying to remember if that's even included with Basic. I think it's included with Basic or maybe Standard. You can just enable the archive, and then suddenly, I think by default, anything older than 2 years in any of their folders, whether it's in their archive folder or their inbox or whatever it is, now goes into a subfolder called inbox or archive inside their in-place archive folder, so that that stuff in that in-place archive doesn't count toward the 50 gig limit on the main account. It's just like a bunch of hand waving from Microsoft. And is this better? How is, I don't know. I guess technically they don't want the Exchange server to just keep accumulating more and more space. And so behind the scenes, this separate archive thing relieves the pressure on their Exchange infrastructure.
I guess that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But it just seems so convoluted. And you'd think when you'd get an email, let's say your client, the email stops flowing, you'd think Microsoft would send him an email that would say, hey, you're at 95% or you're at 99 or whatever. Click here to enable, click here to pay us $8 a month more and make all your problems go away. That would spare the phone call to their support people. That would just make it easier to resolve the.
So it seems like they have different recipes to solve this problem. And I think that's what they don't want to do, Joe, is they don't want to lead you in one direction, because I think the thing that they don't like is, like you said, doubling the size of their Exchange infrastructure by bumping everybody up to 100 gigs. So that seems to be very well hidden. And then the other solution I guess you could do is you could buy what's called an archive license. Who knew? But that works for a person who's working with a web view of Microsoft Outlook Online. But when you're talking about meat and potatoes people who are working in Apple Mail and just want to see all their email, that's not a solution. So again, who knows what would happen if I had turned off Basic and I just kept Exchange Online? I don't think some of the other services would work. I don't think it would work. Do you know the difference between Basic and Exchange Online?
No, it is funny because they have that separate terminology, Exchange Online Plan 2. It's why don't they put it under Basic and Standard as like an option that says more storage? Imagine that if they just called it extra space for $8. Like it just, I don't know, make it discoverable. I don't understand why it's so tricky. It really does seem strange.
And it seems like a real rip if you've got the business premium for $22 a month and you only get 50 gigabytes of mailbox space.
And then I forget that includes something else. Isn't that a terabyte of storage and Teams or so? I don't know, some crazy thing like that.
And you could do the archiving with the business premium, of course. But
I didn't realize that they all standardize on 50 gigs across the board, though. I know that with $22 a month, you get a lot of security services and better protection and all that other stuff. But I actually just went to the site to verify what you said, Jerry, because I was looking, I was like, that's fascinating.
You think I'm making this stuff up?
But yeah, sometimes you do. So I was just calling you out. If I was prepared to call you out if necessary.
Yeah, trust but verify. That's a good policy there. But yeah, I agree. I think it is funny that it's just like 50 gigs across the board, because you'd think for a lot of people, one of the things they'd be looking for is more storage space, and they'd be willing to pay $22 if it meant they get 100 gigs or something.
Sure. I erred on the side of caution in billing and kept track of my time. And I threw out a number, or I billed them for a number that I thought was fair to me, but at the same time offered them some hefty discounts. And I pawned my own soul, eating the sins of too much email.
You're really doubling down on that metaphor, huh?
Yeah.
It's a saga. And like I said, I can relate to some of the issues with uploading and downloading and syncing and moving mail from local to online and stuff like that, especially. One thing I noticed that I had noted a while back was that moving messages in the mail app seems much better now. Like in Monterey, and I think also in Ventura, it seems to work better. So whereas it used to just forget that you were moving mail and either crash or just like it could be incomplete and you wouldn't know what failed, it seems like it's actually more recoverable now. It just seems like it works better in general. I think I've had the experience of quitting and reopening and having it even like resume. Can't be sure of that, but it just in general seems better to me. But
in a vague way,
Outlook,
I can confirm that too, Joe. Yeah.
It's like a just perception. Outlook to me is probably still better than mail for moving messages because it does show, like in the sync status window, it shows useful progress bars that actually show progress. Whereas mail is, here's the barbershop poll. It's just like something's happening. I don't know. What do you expect us to keep track of each and every message? What is this? And so mail is just telling you that things are happening. But oftentimes, it'll be like 0 of 0, like a little striped progress bar, or you see an entry there, but it's not even animated. And you're just like, I guess it's doing something, but it can't be bothered to tell me what it's doing. But Outlook shows like actually like numbers. It's this number of this total. So you can actually see it making progress. Imagine that. So we have this open air feature request corner. So this is where I just make a request to the open air, and I hope that somebody from Apple's listening. So we need the defaults write command to enable that numeric count display, that like an actual progress bar and an actual number of messages. It seems like it would have to be able to do that. Like, why? That's not a technically difficult thing to do. It's like it already knows it has to move 1,000 messages. Why can't it tell me I've moved 800 of 1,000 so far? Like, it seems like it should be able to do that. I don't know why they stopped showing that at some point, but that's my feature request. Bring that back. And if you want to put it behind a default command, fine, but wouldn't it be useful to have that in mail for this kind of project?
That's so you can script it, Joe. Yeah, I think you sound like the people on Apple discussions where they're like, come on, fix this, Apple.
Exactly. Yeah. I probably should go to feedback.apple.com and actually make the request. But yeah, because otherwise, how should we know you want numeric progress? It's an obvious request, but fine.
All right. So I don't mean to take over the whole show. I just have this flurry of things happen to me over the course of 2 weeks. And then time passes by and 3 weeks of nothing happening. But I get these notifications. I've got a number of clients out there with Synology servers. And so I'm just like checking my email, minding my own business. And I get this alert at 4:30 in the afternoon, midweek. And it says that there's been some sort of a power failure at this attorney's office. Now, this particular attorney, we hadn't been working together with them that long. So when I first met with them, they had a Synology 2-bay that looked like it wasn't even online. It was just sitting there, and she said something like, oh yeah, the previous tech guy had this, but I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, this is really a good product, and this is fairly new, and I think we could try to take this investment that you have, however minimal. This could be your server, and we could have you do the Synology Cloud Station, as it was called back then. And it's like your own private Dropbox. So we set all that up for her, and it was working great. And we backed her up to Backblaze B2 service. So she had a cloud backup of that. And again, the drives were working as RAID 1. So I get this alert because I have them set up to send me alerts if something catastrophic happens. And it said, looks like there was a power failure on this Synology box. So I text her that same day and I said, hey, I'm looking at my emails and it looks like your Synology disk station is no longer reachable. Did you turn that off? And I don't get any reply at all. And so the next morning I check it and it looks like it's back online. So I log into it and I see that both drives are tagged as being critical. So that's really strange. Usually one drive or the other will be in some sort of a failure state, but they don't simultaneously happen. I've seen one error out, but I've never seen one say critical for both drives. But it was still operational. The files were accessible. So I send her another email and I said, this is just really strange, but now it looks like you're in trouble with your disk station. And right around that same time period, she sends me an email and she said, "Oh, I probably didn't tell you, but we're moving and I'm going to use the IT firm that my new partner's using."
They're doing a great job so far.
That's a kick in the, you know what?
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay, but you've got this problem right now and you still have services with me till the end of the month at our discounted rate. So we could either stop the show right now, or I could pick this ball up and see if I can help you. I get a phone call with her. It was some sort of dialogue. And she states, "You know what?" She says, "I'm sorry, I did this the wrong way. I'm an a-hole," which
better than them
me,
calling
right?
you that. That's a step in the right direction.
That comes next.
And she said, "I should have looped you in, but this is what we're doing." That's fine. I said, "But what happened with this?" She said, "The movers were moving stuff and they looked in the closet and they said, all that stuff could just be unplugged." What I actually found out later from the new tech people who I talked to on the phone was she unplugged it and she moved it herself so that nothing would happen to it. And so I said to her, all this would, again, I never want to have an adversarial relationship with my clients. So if you told me you're pulling up your tent, moving somewhere else, that's completely fine. But if you had made a call to me before you did this remotely, I could have taken 2 seconds to shut it down for you and you could have safely moved it. I said, so either something happened in transport or there was some sort of intensive read and write that was happening across both disks that actually compromised your disk station. So I don't know whether she understood that or not, but she said, "Mea culpa, I'm guilty." And she was willing to take full responsibility for it. So I'll speed up my story. So we order up a new drive, a new 4 terabyte drive. We shut it down. We pull out one of the old ones, pop it back in, format the drive, and it starts to rebuild. I didn't do a drive integrity test on it, right? We didn't do that. I wanted to get the RAID up and running. And within the course of an hour or so, it marked the brand new drive as crashed.
Ooh,
which is weird.
That is weird.
But that could happen.
Weird. Yeah.
So I did order up 2 drives because that was my intention, to rebuild the other drive. So I went on Amazon, ordered up a brand new drive to replace the one that said crashed. And I met her and I did the same thing again, shut down the machine, put a new drive in slot number 1 and ran the same deal again. And that one got flagged as crashing again. So not critical, but crash. So that tells me there's something wrong with the backplane, something wrong with the box. Who knows what's going on? So at that point, before I replaced the second drive, I brought over one of our work drives, one of our SD work drive. I did a full hyper backup of her data. It wasn't very much data because it was mostly administrative files and client files, but it wasn't years and years of data. So we had a good backup, even if, at that point, the disk station stopped working. So I just opened up a cursory ticket with Synology, and Synology said, yeah, if this was still under warranty, we would just warranty replace it. But it sounds to us like you need to replace the disk station with something new. That was that. And she's terminating services at the end of the month, and I'm fine with that. And I had a nice conversation with the PC guys that are taking over. And I'm like, have fun. I was able to give them a nice looking run book, although I didn't have much data from this company because it was small. And I got that from Hoodoo, which offers documentation online. Either Hoodoo can host it or you can host it on your own server. So I had a nice little impressive little piece of credentials to hand off to the client.
I feel like a new URL is coming, hoodoomac.com.
That's how not to fire your IT guy without shooting yourself in the foot.
It's funny, as we record, the episode that just came out was my story about a client trying to self-heal his own Synology after supposedly a cleaning person bumped it, and maybe he was messing with it. We don't know. But in that case, it was a happier ending because the Synology was okay. It was just the drives that got randomly pulled out of the Synology at the wrong time that needed to be replaced, or some of them had IO errors and some of them just needed to be rebuilt or whatever. And that worked well, actually. But another example of, it's like, why doesn't the client call us and just Give us a heads up. It's such an easy thing to do. Like in your situation, even knowing that they were going to be moving to a new consultancy, they could have told you that just to give you the courtesy of that. And then, hey, do we still have services until the end of the month? Anything we need to know about the network? And it would have been such a easy thing. And by the way, pop quiz, how do you shut down a Synology properly in person? So like, forget about the web interface or anything. Do you guys know that off?
Power button.
That's right. And that's a weird, isn't that a strange answer? Hold the power button down, because in any other system, it just, that's like a power cycle. But
yeah, that's a no. That's not what that's a hard reboot normally. But apparently that's the way. I don't know.
So, Jerry, you literally could have told the client, I don't even need to connect anything. Just knowing that you're moving, the only piece of sensitive equipment would be the Synology. Press and hold the power button for 5 seconds, and it'll do a safe shutdown. And then they could have moved it and plugged it back in. They would have been fine. It's just annoying when that happens. And I guess at least you got a little bit of work out of it at the end there.
Not really, just because a short distance away from my office. And no, it was about an hour billable at the discounted rate because they were part of our managed service plans. It's like work like that I don't need, and then I had to deal with the returns from Amazon, and so I don't charge a client. Oh, one of the boxes that I left at the office, we couldn't find the box, so she had to buy a drive.
Oh wow.
That I had ordered up. She's like, that's okay, just bill me for the drive.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Have you
75?
Yeah, got it. Have you done this Amazon return process where you walk into Whole Foods and hand them a bare drive, pretty much?
I have, yes.
I haven't done that.
Yeah, isn't it's so great? It's the number one best feature of the Whole Foods Amazon merger, whatever.
Okay.
Is you can.
Yeah. I have a little to say about it, because they used to have someone at Whole Foods who would take care of that for you, and they would scan you in, and they were always very nice. And that was someone's job. And then they put this kiosk thing, this behemoth machine that you have to stand in line and watch each person fumble through their stuff and try and find their QR code, and then get that bag that they have to put it in, and then press the thing to open, and then inevitably they put like a large box in there, and then it gets jammed and you can't open, the next person can't open it. This is my personal experience, by the way. I had this happen to me, so I was super annoyed. And then I finally get there and the thing got stuck. And then at the end of it, it's like, how was your experience? Smiley face, flat face, or sad face? I'm like, definitely sad face.
There's no angry face option on that.
I understand that whole concept, but it would essentially be the same service if you went to a UPS store, right? And they have the clear plastic bag and you don't even have to pack it. You just hand them the product and they end up shipping it back to Amazon. Conceptually, it's the same. Except you're dealing with a machine. Yeah,
I've never done that at UPS. When I take it to UPS, at least for Amazon, the times that I go to UPS, I always need the box, apparently. So maybe I just didn't have that experience like you did.
There's a company-owned UPS store near us, or a privately owned one. I guess it doesn't really matter. But I can go there with a labeled box and give it to them. I still have to wait in line. Or I see people coming in there with hair curlers and they don't have a box and a QR code, and they just put it in a plastic bag and they handle it. So
you said it didn't matter, but I haven't you had the experience with privately owned UPS stores where obviously I don't think they get much out of that transaction, where they're just dealing with a return on behalf of some other company or whatever. They seem to always be so annoyed that you have to you're going in to hand them a box. They're like, oh, come on. I've had that experience a number of times where I don't know how they're making money on people that have PO boxes there or that need to ship stuff or whatever. But like when you're just walking in to give them more work to do and basically like they don't get anything out of it, they just seem annoyed.
Yeah. They make a colossal profit when somebody brings in like a 40-pound piece of stereo equipment that they need to foam.
That's you.
Yeah, that's me, right? Actually, I don't do that because it's so expensive to ship with some sort of a custom shipment.
I feel like the UPS store is always annoyed anyway, at least the one by me. I don't know. They're nice, but I brought an empty laptop box in there to ship to somebody so they can put a laptop in it. And I had 2 labels to print out, and I had these codes that they scan, and then it spits out on the thermal printer. And so I scanned the one, and she's okay, this goes on the box. I'm like, yeah. And then she's like, where's this other one go? I'm like, it goes in the box. She's like, you don't have a box for this? I'm like, no, that's what they're going to use to then send it back to me. She's like, but I need to put it on a box. No, you don't. Just put it inside the box and the person will slap that. And we had this, I don't know, it felt like a 5-minute conversation where she was totally baffled. And then at this point, a line started to build behind me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not good. And we finally got to the hang of it. She's like, okay, I'll put it inside. I'm like, yes, put it inside. That's for good.
This is where a high school education really pays off. So.
I had this guy at a FedEx location once scoff at me and roll his eyes when I was carrying this fully packed, ready to go, clearly a box for a monitor that I had bought. And I was all taped up and ready to go. Same situation. Like, I just need to print a label and send it back. It was returned to Amazon because it was a monitor that just didn't work out for me. So I was returning it. And he scoffed and rolled his eyes. Oh, you bought a monitor on Amazon. I don't know why you do that. Something like that. Like, he thought that it had broken in transit. And I bought a different one that's better. And I'm returning this one. Like, that's why I bought it on Amazon. 35 days in or something, I was able to return it. That's why I'm buying it on Amazon. It was just funny. It's like he had the wrong impression and was thinking he knew something that I learned my lesson or something. And it's no, actually, this worked out great for me.
Speaking of shipping stuff, how many times has this happened to you where you go to a UPS drop-off box? And sometimes it's not necessarily stuff for work. It's mostly things for the house that we got that didn't work out or whatever. And we're returning it. And the UPS box is completely jammed with stuff. So here's the question. You've seen this. I'm talking about where you open up the little lever and you can't even get your package in because mountains of packages are in it.
I've seen.
Yes?
I can imagine that.
All right, just forget about it. I mean, scrap it.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it